Hello and welcome, Exiles, to another mana-based attack character, which is Volcanic Fissure, Hierophant Totem. Now, I'm going to go over some of the mechanics of this character that I think are interesting or I think are cool that I like about this character. To start things off with, I'm getting Rage Sustain through Calm Spirit with an enchant where Arcane Cloak grants life regen equal to 15% of the mana spent. I think this is a pretty interesting thing. Basically, what it means is when I press Arcane Cloak, you'll see I have 6,500 Arcane Cloak here. 15% of that, roughly, is going to be life regen per second, which means we get a bunch of Rage Sustain from Calm Spirit. I have that combined with, I'm doing Rational Doctrine right now, which I'm not particularly happy with. I don't necessarily like this as the current solution. I have some plans for something I might want to change for this character, but it would be, I'll explain it later, but it would be a complete swap in ascendancies and how I'm building this character to begin with. Point is, we have this character who has basically life regen. Well, we don't see it here, but you can see we have energy shield regen of 356. We have Pious Path on this character, so our energy shield regen represents how much life regen we have as well. So 1500 regen per second, essentially 15 rage per second. Very good for berserk uptime. That means we have berserk pretty regularly on this character simply because we have this arcane cloak mod, which I think is a pretty cool way to get a bunch of life sustain or a bunch of life regen into a character that doesn't really stack a bunch of life sustain to begin with. It's literally just we're stacking mana, Arcane Cloak plus this enchant, and all of a sudden we have a huge source of life regen, which we can either use to sustain our life pool or do something like this, like getting Calm Spirit into a character that is using an attack-based, mana-based character. The other mechanics we have going on here is, weirdly enough, Eternal Damnation, the one flat stat it has besides cast res, is mana. So this amulet actually is a decent mana amulet, even though it's still behind its Zeri's Foible. Its Zeri's Foible is going to give you up to 120. This will get you to around like 85-ish if I catalyst it. And this one will have 10 cast res versus the 100% mana regen rate and the extra 25% increased mana. So arguably, this is still going to get us less in terms of flat mana than our Zeri's Foible will, but it comes with a massive upside of 30-something% elemental damage reduction, so we can have a character that doesn't necessarily have a lot of good options for getting damage reduction, and then all of a sudden we put on this amulet and we do have good damage reduction, because mana builds, one of the things they struggle with is damage reduction. It's very hard to get damage reduction on a character where you don't want to reserve your mana pool, because auras are so defensively balanced that it's like, okay, how do I get defensive auras? Well, there's our option right now. We can go with Eternal Damnation, sacrifice a little bit of our sustain for a lot of mitigation. On top of that, we combine this with Replica Loreweave. Fun fact about Replica Loreweave is it's actually like the third highest amount of flat mana you can get on a chess piece. It sets our res to 72, which is technically 2 max res from what Eternal Damnation would be. And then on top of that, it gives us crit, it gives us attributes, and it gives us a lot of life. So this chest, I actually like it quite a decent amount. I know it's not a Cloak of Defiance, but we're trading basically 1% base mana regen per second for 160 crit, 20 all attributes, flat fizz, flat life, flat ES, that is a little bit better I think, elemental damage, and a bump in max res. On top of that, we are also building around CDR into our guard skill into our arcane cloak. You'll have 60% from the tree, 20%, 20%, and then another 20% here. And then I'm getting about 20% on my belt. So my CDR time for cloak or arcane cloak is about 2 seconds, while the duration is about 7 seconds. So in a roughly 9-second cycle, it's going to be 7 seconds up, 2 seconds down in terms of all of our flat. And this is giving us roughly about what is it, like 15%? Is that what the number it is that it gives us as damage? Buffs added damage equal to 14% of mana spent by the skill. So whatever this is, it's giving us 14% of that, I think, roughly. So it's like 1,000 flat lightning, which means we can have a weapon that doesn't have any damage on it, and we still have a lot of flat lightning. With 1,000 flat lightning coming from this is almost like it's a 2,000 EDPS weapon, even though all it has on it is mana, attack speed, crit chance, crit multi, pen, and hits can't be evaded. Those stats altogether still mean we're dealing a decent amount of damage because we have a lot of flat. This unfortunately means there is 2 seconds where you have virtually no flat damage. So that's the downside of building around Arcane Cloak. There is downtime to damage. Now, this leads me into a topic of my issue with the build, which is totems. Okay, so the issue is, for this character to operate, well, we need 2 things. We need Arcane Cloak to initially spend a bunch of mana to get all of our percent damage scaling from Indigon, but then on top of that, we need to keep spending damage, or we need to keep spending mana to keep the damage that we get from Indigon high. The unfortunate thing is, the thing I can spend mana with is totems, but if I keep wanting to summon totems to keep spending mana, unfortunately for me, these totems have what I could tell is a fairly large delay in between me putting them down and them dealing damage. So I needed basically for this character to have a better feels good time in terms of damage uptime, or in terms of damage uptime, and that Indigan keeps giving us a high percent damages. I needed to set up a second skill to cast like outside of my totems, and I don't have one of those yet. I'm kind of limited on gem sockets. It's kind of hard for me to do. And then the other issue is, I'm going over my issues with the character, and they all basically stem back to one thing, and that's totems. The other issue is these totems die a lot. They die a whole lot, especially the second you go into Ubers. You're going to be constantly resummoning, and they're really kind of annoying. You're thinking the whole time, what if I was just a regular attack-based character? So I have the issue with the totems die a lot. There's a delay in them dealing damage. While I'm mapping, I have to put them down and keep moving if I'm going to efficiently map, and that means I don't get to see the cool animation of Volcanic Fissure, and that's half the satisfaction of the build, so I don't even see the clear going on. And then there's the other awkwardness of keeping my percent damage scaling from Indigan up while I'm trying to run through the map, jump around, yada, yada, yada. So those are kind of layered issues, and they all stem back to one thing, and that's how much I don't enjoy totems. So that being said, I think I'm going to take another stab at this character where I respec to a Inquisitor setup and basically just a regular attack-based Volcanic Fissure, maybe Val Volcanic Fissure, and try that out and see how it goes. But that being said, this was still the attempt or the stab at it we went with. Ultimately, the character I'm pretty happy with in terms of gear to power level, minus these three items right here. These three items right here make up 95% of the build cost, probably. You could go through the POB, you could look at, I might be wrong, maybe there's something else that's expensive in my POB. I don't think there really is. The highest path jewels were extremely cheap. The healthy mines, like 150C. Rain of Splinters was like 1 to 2 divines, and then you have the rest of my gear here. You can look at it in the POB. Basically, Calandra's Touch I put on because I didn't want to craft another ring. I was getting lazy, and that's a 60 divine mistake right there. Rational Doctrine, this is a matter of I need to get a better way to proc Consecrated Ground, and part of that is I'm going to do this Inquisitor swap where I won't have to use this jewel, and boom, I save another 20 divines there. And then ultimately, I might just take Progenesis off just to not have it in the character, so that way I could say, hey, look, cheap gear and build still good. Moral of the story is, this character, when I set up my totems, when I proc my Blood Rage, when the stars align, Indigan is up, and I have Battle Mage's Cry to multiply my Indigan damage, the damage is actually really good. Unfortunately, the stars don't align all the time, and there's this inconsistency and this awkwardness. Hence, I am tempted to try a swap on Inquisitor. Now, I'm going to go over something else that is an issue with this character, which is part of my automation of the build is Battle Mage's Cry. I like Battle Mage's Cry a lot. We have it set to instant cast over here, and it's giving us buff effect, and it's multiplying the damage we get from Indigan, which is fantastic. And I opted to automate my Blood Rage, my Curse, and my Berserk, so those are just buttons I don't have to press. The problem with me automating those things is the requirement of Battle Mage's Cry is you have to hit an enemy in order to proc those things. Initially, I was shield charging around, but unfortunately, shield charge doesn't take advantage of my hits can't be evaded, so I was missing 70% of the time because I stacked no accuracy on this character. Now that I swapped to Leap Slam, I have to Leap Slam, but if I hit them, it will proc the skills, but it's still awkward to Leap Slam on enemies, to proc your Berserk, to proc your Blood Rage, to proc your Curse, and ultimately, if I just swap to Volcanic Fissure, no totem setup, and I'm just hitting the enemies with that, the Battle Mage's Cry will all of a sudden be automated perfectly as it should be, proccing all of these things. So, long story short is, we went for mana stacking, attack-based again, but this time with the approach of using a Hierophant. I think I'm forcing totems. I don't like totems. Totems have issues that frustrate me. Ultimately, I think the correct play is probably I'm probably gonna do a respec to an Inquisitor with a regular setup of Volcanic Fissure and just using it regularly. Still, this pretty much the same tree. Almost, it's only gonna be almost identical to this one. I might change a few things, like dropping the totem nodes, obviously, maybe picking up Berserking. We'll change a couple things here and there, but the character overall won't change that much. But long story short is, I think ultimately the result in how this character will feel play will be quite a lot higher, because my damage won't be just a 4-second window because I'm going to be constantly attacking, and that will spend mana, which will make it a 7-second versus a 2-second window, which should end up feeling quite a bit better. We'll see about that, but that is one of the main improvements or changes I'm going to try on the build and see how it feels, how it plays out. Ultimately, I really like this idea of mana-based attack characters, especially when I swap out of totems. I can swap back into going for things like Leech. I might just anoint Essence Sap. I'm not sure. I haven't really decided the way I'm going to go about it. But point is, there are improvements I'm going to make to the character, or I think will be improvements in terms of how this character plays, because I want to try to continue taking stabs at the attack-based mana stagger. I think there's something here. I could just be crazy. I could just be completely wrong, but I really feel deep down there is something here, and I want to try to make it work. I want to try to see if it can actually be something, if it actually has potential to be a really good, solid, viable build, and that's what I want to work towards. So, anyways, this is the character I've been working on. I'll just do a showcase of what it looks like on a full map. I know I just showcased the Minotaur earlier. On this character, full disclosure, I have attempted Uber Eater. I did that the first try, and I did an Uber Cirrus, which I lost to with about like 20%, 25% HP left on Cirrus, because I couldn't seem to not stand on the ground effect that does degen. I always stand on it. I have an inability to not stand on that stuff, so I would regularly die to that, and that's just be what it is, and that's okay. And you can see what I'm talking about, where I efficiently, if I want to clear with this character and like have like decent clear speed, I have to put the totems down, and then I have to walk away, and then I trust that when I go back, the things over here are dead, and it didn't kill the essence monster. I guess the damage didn't proc quite enough on it, but point is, you can see that there's the awkward playstyle of, if it's totems, they have to wait for them to spawn, and I could wait for them to spawn and then wait for things to die, or I could just try to keep moving and keep getting progression through the zone, through the area, so to speak. So I got this stuff going on with the character, and then the other thing about the character is, quite simply, it just comes down to a matter of, I'm not a totem playstyle. I'm not a totem enjoyer. So this, I'm pretty happy with some of the things I did. The arcane cloak for the rage sustain, I think, is beautiful. I think that works great. Attack-based mana, the flat damage from arcane cloak, being able to have a weapon that just has a bunch of stats that are pretty much just hits can't be evaded, mana, stat stick, attack speed, yada yada yada. I like that. That I think is beautiful. There's things that I'm very happy with this character, and there's things I want to improve upon, and I want to develop this character further, so to speak. So you'll see right now we don't have arcane cloak. The second we get arcane cloak, all of a sudden, well, I was gonna say our damage goes up, but he disappeared, so arcane cloak, never mind, forget that, I guess. Let's see if he comes back. He does come back, and then we put arcane cloak on him, and then we gotta just delete him, right? We have a decent amount of damage. The character has a ton of EHP from mana, from life, from ES, from both the percent mana you get from just having a Hierophant tree, and then a bunch of gain ES from the Sanctuary Thought. If I do this Inquisitor swap, I'll probably drop about 2,000 ES roughly, but in return, I'll get the pen node. I will get consistent conk ground effect with 15% damage increased damage taken for enemies. I'll get enjoyable things like crit from the strength and the int, and I'll probably end up stealing divine guidance, which is a pretty cheap node. Stuff like that, I'll swap around, I'll change, and we'll see how it performs. That's not gonna be the next thing. I'll probably do this a couple builds from now, maybe one or two. I'll do this respec. I just want to take a break from this character. Probably end up selling the Claudius Touch. Probably end up selling the Rational Doctrine. I'm kind of brokish now, so I want to liquidate the few things I have that are worth money and have that funding for some other characters I have planned and other characters I'm working on. Anyways, this was my stab at totems with mana stacking Hierophant, attack based, and this is how it went. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you found some of this interesting for the setup I did on this character. And as always, thanks for watching the video. Take care, Exiles, and peace out. Goodbye.